As you travel along the A104 road near Mahiu, Kenya, surrounded by sweeping landscapes and the dramatic descent into the Great Rift Valley, there is a small structure that most people pass without a second glance. It doesn't tower over the road. It doesn't announce itself with signs or crowds. Yet quietly, almost humbly, it stands there. The Traveller's Chapel, also known as the Mahiu Catholic Church. At first sight, it looks almost impossibly small, but behind these stone walls lies a story shaped by war, faith, captivity, and human resilience. A story that connects Kenya to one of the darkest chapters of global history, which is World War II. To understand how this chapel came to exist, we need to go back to the early 1940s. World War II was raging across Europe, North Africa, and beyond. Italy, under the leadership of Benito Mussolini, had aligned itself with Nazi Germany. Italian forces were active in East Africa, particularly in Ethiopia, Eritrea, and Somalia, regions that were strategically important at the time. Kenya, then a British colony, became a critical military and logistical hub for the Allied forces. Roads, railways, and supply routes through Kenya were essential for moving troops and equipment across East Africa. The Allied forces began defeating Italian troops in the region. Thousands of Italian soldiers were captured. These prisoners of war were transported far from the front lines, including to camps in Kenya. By the early 1940s, Kenya hosted several prisoners of war camps holding Italian soldiers. Unlike the harsh conditions often imagined in wartime captivity, many Italian prisoners of war in Kenya were treated relatively humanely under British supervision, in accordance with the Geneva Conventions. The British authorities put the prisoners to work on infrastructure projects that were vital to the colony. One of the most important projects that was the construction and improvement of the Nairobi-Naivasha road, the road we know today as A104. Mahiu, located near the steep escarpment of the Great Rift Valley, was a challenging section of this route. The terrain was rugged, the weather unpredictable, and the work physically demanding. It was here, while working on this road, that a group of Italian prisoners decided to build something unexpected. Not a military structure, not a shelter, but a chapel. Life as a prisoner of war was uncertain. These men were far from home, separated from their families, unsure if they would ever return to Italy. For many of them, faith became a source of comfort and identity. Building a chapel offered a sense of purpose, dignity, and spiritual refuge amid captivity. Using simple materials and their own skills, Many Italians were trained artisans, masons, and builders. They constructed a small church by the roadside in 1942. It was meant to impress. It was meant to endure. The result was the Travelers' Chapel, a church measuring just 15 by 8 feet. That's smaller than most modern bedrooms. Inside, there is space for only 12 people, seated on 4 small wooden benches. The number 12 is widely believed to be symbolic, representing the 12 disciples of Jesus. Because of its size, the Travelers' Chapel is often described as the smallest church in Kenya and possibly the smallest in all of Africa. And yet, despite its size, it has hosted countless prayers over the decades from prisoners, road workers, travelers, drivers, and visitors passing through the Rift Valley. Though simple, the chapel carries unmistakable Italian architectural influences. The stonework is carefully laid, the proportions are deliberate, and inside, Latin inscriptions still grace the walls. One of the most striking phrases reads, "Venite ad memone," which translates to "Come to me, my people." It's a powerful message, especially considering who built it, men who themselves longed to return home. These inscriptions were not just decoration, they were expressions of hope, faith, and longing carved into stone. The chapel's location is no accident. Sitting at the foot of the Great Rift Valley escarpment, it stands at a point where travelers often stop to rest and admire the views or prepare for the journey ahead, whether heading to Naivasha, Narok, or the Masai Mara. Over time, the chapel earned its name, the Travelers' Chapel. Truck drivers stop to pray for safety, tourists stop out of curiosity, locals stop out of tradition. For many, it becomes a moment of stillness in the middle of a long journey. After the war, when World War II ended, Italian prisoners of war were eventually repatriated back to Italy, but the chapel they left behind remained. As Kenya moved towards independence and the region developed, the Travelers' Chapel survived changing governments, expanding roads, and increasing traffic. Recognizing its historical and cultural importance, efforts were made to preserve it, and today the chapel is jointly managed through the support of the Italian Embassy, the Kenyan government, and well-wishers who understand its significance. It stands not only as a religious site, but a historical monument, a reminder of Kenya's role in global history. Today, the Travelers' Chapel is often and open to the public on most days of the week. Entry is completely free, and visitors are encouraged to dress modestly and treat the space with respect. Early mornings and late afternoons offer the best lighting, especially for photography and video. But beyond photos, what truly draws people here is the story. A story of war and peace, of captivity and faith, of how even the smallest places, humanity leaves lasting marks. In a world where travel is often rushed and destinations are measured by size and popularity, the Travelers' Chapel teaches a different lesson. Sometimes the most powerful stories are hidden in plain sight. Sometimes history whispers instead of shouting. And sometimes all it takes is a tiny chapel by the roadside to remind us of resilience, faith, and the shared threads of human history. So the next time you pass through my Mahiu, slow down, look closely, and remember, even the smallest place can carry the weight of the world.